This is the Ancient and Medieval History lecture for Wednesday, the 26th of January, 2021. Rome had gotten everything it could have possibly wanted with the defeat of Carthage in the Second Punic War. The third was fairly anticlimactic. One of the things they got was freedom from anxiety. What are you doing? Good luck. Looks like you're trying to break open the seal that hides the secrets of the world. Still, you're doing it. So Carthage's threat, the razor at Rome's throat, is removed. And in addition to that relief, Rome's economy is boosted by the sudden presence of massive numbers of slaves, to the point where slaves are a new social class in Roman society. They've always been there, but now there are slaves for everything. We've got slaves. There's just so many slaves because Rome is capturing so many prisoners. And when those prisoners have children, if their owners want to breed them like cattle, their children are born slaves. So as Rome marches east and starts seizing greater portions of the Greek world, they get even more slaves, which is great if you're super rich or if you run a business and can get slaves rather than employees to do your bidding. However, it becomes a problem for Roman society because with so many slaves, what's the point of having a working class? We face something like this today. In the United States, when I was born in 1965, a guy with a high school diploma or without a high school diploma could get work in a factory and provide a good living to his family. Stay-at-home wife, raise some kids, send them to college, because American society had stabilized. It had been 40 years since massive immigration was stopped. Most of the people growing up in America had parents who were born here or more. They were part of the culture. And the United States had recently won World War II and was still benefiting from having had the only economy in the world not bombed literally back to the Stone Age. Today, a guy without a high school diploma, or with a high school diploma, and that's all, faces some serious problems. Because, number one, for those few industries that are still here in the United States, machines have taken many of the jobs that men used to do. Like slaves, machines don't have to be paid. You buy them, you maintain them, you throw them away and replace them when they're no longer profitable to be maintained, just like slaves. But we have also, thanks to the wisdom of moving our industry offshore to other countries, because, gosh, we don't want pollution, and, all those blue-collar men are so stinky. And it would be so much better if we all had white-collar jobs in offices. And everyone would then go to college. And everyone would then be happy and prosperous. Except not everyone should go to college. You and I both know this. There are huge, in fact, most people probably shouldn't go to college. Most people don't want to. They have no internal drive to learn that much about any specialized bit of information. And a lot of people, guys particularly, would rather become a specialist in something mechanical or electronic or like welding, a trade where you work with your hands, where you do something physical. Why? Because men have an excess of physical energy. But we moved our industry offshore. when I was your age or younger. And now, the only thing I can think of made here in the United States is My Pillow, which really involves buying a bunch of memory foam and ripping it up, maybe by hand, and then putting it in pillows and stitching it. And the tennis ball fuzz, which is still made in that Tex-Tech factory in Maine that I may have told you about. Most of the things that we have are not made here. They're made in India or Japan or the Philippines or Indonesia or China. Yes. In fact, for reasons that I cannot even begin to fathom, American businesses decided to invest in building some of the most modern factories in the world in the People's Republic of China, a country that calls itself communist but is really, in fact, National Socialist. Their economic system is almost exactly what Hitler had. It's called cartel capitalism. They call themselves communists, but they're really not. And anyone who wants to do business in China has to do business with the Communist Party on the Communist Party's terms. So we've gotten to the point where without Chinese industry sending us the products that we need, we're in heap big trouble. Not that that would ever happen last year and this year. No. Not that that would ever cause a supply chain problem. No, it'll be perfectly fine. Especially since of all the countries in the world, with the possible exception of Iran, Russia, and North Korea, the People's Republic of China, Communist China, is the most likely country on earth to tangle with us. But that'll never happen, because we make money together. So if you're a man or a woman who doesn't have a niche job like mine, it's hard to make a living. It's certainly hard to earn a living standard equivalent to that of 1 or 2 generations ago. And there are reasons for this. What it means is we're deindustrialized, we don't have as much pollution, we don't have as many jobs, and we're not at all self-sufficient. This is causing social problems, including, in some families' cases, the need for each adult, mom and dad, to hold 2 or 3 jobs, just to bring in enough money to put food on the table, a roof over your head, and have the possibility of earning money for college for you guys. Yeah.
Isn't one of the problems also that, like, the minimum wage that most people are earning has not changed at all, but all the prices of, like, our goods and what we need to survive has gone up?
I don't buy the minimum wage argument, and I'll tell you why. Minimum wage is a concept that works if you believe that the economy can be managed quite closely by government. The $15 minimum wage was advocated by people who thought that a $15 an hour wage for 40 hours a week would bring in a basic decent standard of living, which it might in backwoods Nebraska. But $15 an hour isn't even half of what you need just to survive in a place like like Seattle or Manhattan or Chicago. So the idea of a national minimum wage is ludicrous to me because also, most people don't make minimum wage. If you get a job somewhere, after a bit, you get more money. They pay you more because you're better at your job than when you started. Minimum wage tends to be for teenagers, for people who are doing part-time jobs. And minimum wage, by the way, it doesn't apply to a whole bunch of jobs like farm jobs. The problem is that good-paying jobs are rare, unless you are a lawyer. And even then, there are a lot of desperate lawyers out there. Used to be, if you wanted a good living, you could find a factory job somewhere. You'd have to learn how to operate the machinery. You'd have to learn how to repair the machinery. You'd have to be willing to go in whenever the boss needed you. You'd have to be a good worker. But if you did all of those things, you could make a living that would provide home, car, food, college, all that stuff. The economy has changed. Changing the minimum wage would not itself solve the problem because the underlying problems in the economy are the real problem. To have a society where everyone aspires to a college education and a white collar job simply is not looking at the way people really are. If you look at any school other than this, you'll see that. Most students are not deeply invested in academics. Some are, most are not. Most do what they need to do to get by. Maybe they get B's, maybe they get A's, but they really don't care beyond a certain point. It's certainly not going to work beyond a certain point. Maybe they're there because they want to play soccer, or maybe they're there because they want to get into a college because a college is the only way they can get their dream fulfilled. But for those people that would have gotten factory jobs 50 years ago, 60 years ago, that's no longer an option for most people. And what that means is what are those types of people, and there are huge numbers of them, going to do? This is a problem for us. My own belief is that we should scrap environmental laws and reindustrialize. I don't want completely filthy air or water, but I'm willing to put up with a reasonable amount of pollution in order to give the majority of American workers an opportunity for a decent living. Also, I don't like the idea of exposing my wrists to the communist Chinese and saying, please, please continue to do business with us. Please don't cut our supplies off. To me, that's insanity. But I might be wrong. Unless you have an economic engine that's going to provide work in the private sector, a government policy like increasing the minimum wage or providing a basic standard of living with welfare is a castle built on a foundation of sand. Because the government does not make money. The government acquires its money through taxation of one kind or another. That means you need a private sector profitable enough to draw taxes from. If the private sector is moribund, if the private sector is stagnant, if the private sector basically is anemic and weak, you can't draw too much wealth from that private sector in order to pay for your social programs. It just won't work. What we've done is we've decided to borrow money. Yeah, that'll work. So we have a massive national debt. We have massive, every year we increase the debt. In fact, within the last decade, half the national debt has been built. That's scary. That means that the amount of federal income that comes from borrowing money has gone radically up recently. There are always economic problems. I'm not trying to terrify you about life, but it's a fundamental problem that we have deindustrialized because there are huge numbers of Americans that have no interest or ability to compete in an economy strictly composed of white-collar jobs and service jobs. And the thing about white-collar jobs is they don't pay what they used to, and service jobs is you need 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet.
Sorry, kind of
Please.
to turn it back to the minimum wage. I remember a couple of years ago I was researching something for a project, and the minimum wage and the wage gap got brought into it. But wasn't the minimum wage, when it was first established nationally, it's about $7.50?
Well, I remember the minimum wage being $3.37 an hour. And then they raised it.
And so wasn't the minimum wage supposed to be the minimum amount someone could earn to be able to live comfortably without money, wants, or needs?
Those people who foisted the minimum wage upon us believed that. But the minimum wage never applied to agricultural workers, which is a large number of poor people. Agricultural workers get paid significantly less than minimum wage. And they don't have benefits. That's why so many of them are illegal aliens. Because everyone nods and winks and says, well, without illegal aliens, all food would be more expensive. I'd rather have more expensive food. But the government establishing wages and prices is something that there's a record on that goes back to the Middle Kingdom of Egypt and to the Emperor Diocletian in the late Roman Empire. We're going to talk about that. Let's say a person in government says, we want everyone to have a decent living. We'll use modern American dollars, but it's not $15 an hour. We're going to say that each state will come up with an equivalent of $18 an hour. Some states that'll be bigger, like New York or Washington. Some states will be less, like Arkansas or Iowa. Whatever the equivalent of $18 an hour buying power is. So the government has mandated that. What business owners who are working on very narrow profit margins are going to have to do then, unless they want to be lawbreakers, is they're going to have to figure out a way to get the work they need done with an overhead that includes wages, electric bills, rent, that sort of thing, that still allows us to make a minimum profit. What McDonald's has done is they have automated many of their operations. So they require fewer workers so that they can pay those workers the inflated wage. In reality, in a free market, the market determines wages. Why aren't teachers paid as much as doctors? Because doctors have much more rare skills that are much more necessary for the survival of people. Why are ditch diggers paid less than teachers? Because there's a greater supply of ditch diggers out there than there are people qualified to do what I do. When you interfere with the market by creating an arbitrary minimum wage, you force businesses to make choices. And usually what they do is they lay off workers so that the workers that remain can get that money. But what about those workers who lose their jobs? Whenever you establish a wage or a price on the basis of a government fiat, a black market is usually created. I remember this. I could go on. I actually have a lot of things I need to teach today. Minimum wage, I believe, is an article of faith. Some people believe that by establishing a minimum wage for labor, you can ensure that poor people are going to be provided for by their wages reasonably. But the fundamental assumption there is that the market will support it. The market is not filled with fat cats making massive profit margins. Most of the time, most of the businesses, like a supermarket, operates on a very, very, very fine, very narrow profit margin. And if you mess with their ecosystem, if you mess with either the cost of the supplies or the cost of the labor or the cost of the property or the electricity, prices will immediately go up. And that means that some people who used to be able to afford a certain amount of food can now only afford this amount of food. It's a complicated thing. I feel like I've stepped all over your point, and that isn't what I wanted to do. Do you wish to say one more thing?
Not yet. I'm probably going to go look at it some more.
Okay, by all means. And again, there are people who just as an article of faith believe it's a good thing to do because they think it's a good thing to do. And I don't dispute faith. Faith is a pure thing. It's a wonderful thing. Okay. Rome's problem is the slaves drive out the labor of free men. Free men can't get work, and there's the story I told you yesterday about Terces. And this creates a huge number of unemployed Romans who are desperate. The urban poor, the Roman mob, the proletarians. And the existence of massive numbers of slaves and an increasing number of proletarians destabilizes what had been Rome's society. It's no longer possible for an average guy to be a plebeian, work a family farm, and make a living. It's no longer possible for an average guy to learn a skill like carpentry or blacksmithing and make a living unless he owns his own shop. Because slaves will do it for less. The great problem with American labor, and this is why people went offshore, Environmental regulations increased the cost of business in America. Unions demanded a higher set of wages. National and state and local minimum wages were established, also driving up the cost of labor. If I'm making widgets and I want to keep a factory open in the United States, I've got to pay my workers $20 or $30 an hour. I've got to make sure they have dental benefits and eye care benefits and health care benefits, and I've got to make sure their factory isn't a death trap. All of that costs money. So in fact, if you factor all that in, I'm paying to keep my factory of widget makers in the United States $40 or $50 an hour to each worker. I can get the same widgets made in China or in Indonesia or in India for $5 an hour. I do not have to worry about environmental regulations. I do not have to worry about unions driving up the cost of labor. I do not have to worry about paying benefits. $5 an hour. And those workers in India or China, or China actually is pricing itself out these days, but in India or Indonesia, it used to be in China, it used to be in Japan before that, those workers are grateful to get $3, $4, or $5 an hour. They'll work their buns off for $3, $4, or $5 an hour. So is it possible for me to keep my factory in the United States? A lot of businesses said no. It's not that people were just unpatriotic. They moved their factories offshore because American labor priced itself out. My grandfather worked tugboats in New York Harbor. And he loved that job. He was an engineer. He was on the water. It was a great job for him. He actually had a college degree in banking, but he hated banking, and he got a job working the boats. In the early 1960s, the harbor workers, including tugboatmen, around New York Harbor, which at that time was the busiest harbor on the east coast of the United States, went on strike. And they went on strike for higher wages and greater benefits and shorter hours and better working conditions. The harbor of New York City was closed down for months. The workers eventually extorted everything they wanted from the city and from management, and they got their goals. However, here's what happened. When New York Harbor closed down, that shipping needed to go somewhere. And Baltimore said, come to Baltimore. You'll be happier. And Baltimore made it a competitive environment. And by the time the dock workers and the tugboatmen of New York City had gotten what they wanted, which made it more expensive to do business in New York, a lot of the shipping companies said, yeah, that's nice, we're not coming back. And from that time, Baltimore has been the biggest port for shipping on the east coast of the United States. Those dock workers and tugboatmen priced themselves out. My grandfather's company folded and he lost his job. He had to work in a different line, and he hated it. The cost of doing business is something that any business has to take into account. It became impossible for most businesses to stay in the United States for production because production costs were jacked up by labor movements and by environmental regulations, and by safety regulations. And a good person would say, well, don't workers deserve a safe environment? Don't they deserve a decent standard of living? Don't they deserve health care benefits and eye care benefits and dental benefits? And the answer is yes. Please make sure your notes are out. And yeah, in a perfect world, they would. But by making those things government mandates, business had a choice. They could stay in an area that was deeply and profoundly unprofitable, or they could maintain their integrity as a business and go where the labor was cheaper. And business will always go, unless there's a real good reason not to, where the labor is cheaper. It's like water will always flow downhill, given a choice. Gravity makes that choice for them. Economics makes the choice for business. So what happened, and I'm coming back to the minimum wage because I do want to honor your point, is there were a lot of cities over the last 10 or 15 years because the cities are left-leaning that decided we locally are going to have a $15 minimum wage. And what happened is massive numbers of businesses left those cities. So the jobs that used to exist don't anymore because the businesses decided that they could not profitably do their job in that environment. So they went somewhere where they would get tax benefits and where they wouldn't have to pay their workers that level of wage. So I'm trying to explain all of this to indicate the intractability of this problem. And by intractability, that's a fancy way of saying it's damn hard to solve. Rome's politics changed as a result of the arrival of massive numbers of slaves and proletarians, the urban poor, the Roman mob. And that is the new political parties, the Optimates and the Populares. The Optimates claim that they are the party of the rich, and that everyone calls them. Optimates means optimum, best and brightest. The Populares claim to be the popular party. We're the people's party. We care about everyday people. Shh. Both parties are run by rich patrons. Both parties are run by senatorial families. Both parties have rich guys in charge and poor guys who are clients who will do whatever they are told, including violence. So Rome's politics becomes polarized. That means it's harder and harder to find somebody who can see good on both sides. More and more people become hardcore Optimates and hardcore Populares, and they have more and more eagerness to just destroy each other, to have scorched earth total victory. After all, Romans are ambitious, are they not? So, this is the environment just over 100 years before Christ is born, according to St. Jerome, where the Gracchi become famous. Gaius and Tiberius Gracchus are from an old Roman family, a noble Roman family, a Roman family descended from the gods. The belief is all old Roman families are believed to be descended from the gods. The Caesars, for example, the Julii, they're descended from Venus, the Roman Aphrodite. And they're charming people, the Julii are, usually. So Gaius and Tiberius Gracchus, known to history as the Gracchi, they're brothers, one's older, one's younger, they become leading tribunes of the plebs, each at different times. They are populares. They're from rich aristocratic families, but they want what's good for the people. Just ask them, they'll tell you. And here's their program. The Gracchi say that the problem is slavery. We identify it. But you can't get rid of slavery. It's too convenient. So here's what you can do. You look at the land. Most of the proletariat would be much happier on their own plot of land, their own family farm. But the countryside is increasingly dominated by these latifundia, these massive, massive, massive plantations. So what we should do as the Senate and people of Rome is place a maximum size on a latifundia. A size where somebody can be rich and powerful and profitable, but no one needs a latifundia that's as big as a country. And some were approaching that. So what we're going to do is we're going to say there's going to be a maximum size to the latifundia. And everything beyond that size will be confiscated by the government. The government will pay a minimum price, not market value, for the extra land that these super rich latifundistas have. Okay? What are we going to do with that extra land? Well, we, the Senate and people of Rome, the Populare Party, what we're going to do is we're going to divide that extra land, amongst the proletarians and give them to the proletariat as family farms. Now, proletarians who get these farms will owe us the cost of the land, and they'll have to, therefore, basically, they'll be given the land and a loan, and they have to pay back the loan. But by making a maximum size on latifundis, on plantations, and by giving the excess land to the proletarians, you solve two problems, at least. First off, the latifundistas are becoming so powerful, they're dominating politics. They're dominating the Optimates. Secondly, the proletarians are really a problem because they have no income, they have no soul, they have no center, they have no dignity. They're basically violence waiting to happen. Get them on the land. Get them becoming self-supporting again. Now, this seems like a great idea. And there was an American politician named Huey Long who was governor and senator from Louisiana at the same time, back in the late 20s and early 30s during the time of the Great Depression. Huey Long was called Kingfish. And his slogan was, and he even turned it into a song, "Every man a king, but no one wears a crown." And he said that no American should be able to hold assets in excess of $100,000. That anyone, or no, I think it was $1 million. Yeah, it was $1 million because you can be a millionaire. So any American who wants to can own up to $1 million in assets. But everything above $1 million, and this is $1,933. This is, a lot more than $1 million in 2022. Everything above $1 million would be confiscated by the government and then distributed in such a way that the most people get the most benefit from it. There's a word for this. It's called communism. And Huey Long actually was in the process of challenging for the presidency of the United States in 1936, and it looked like he would have a good chance, and somebody shot him dead. He was assassinated because there was fear that he would bring a communist revolution by any other name to the United States. What he did in Louisiana was pretty scary. It's difficult to square with the Constitution and property rights. But it seemed to be a solution to the Great Depression. Every man a king, but no one wears a crown. You can be a millionaire. You can be like the government has the authority to decide what's enough property. Well, the Gracchi have a similar plan. Let's imagine that we apply the Gracchi's plan. We're going to look at the downside now. What the Optimates say is, we acquired this land legally. This is our land. We earned it by our skill and by our hard work, and you don't have a right to take it from us. Let's apply it in a way that you guys, as Americans of 2022, will understand. Around the world, there is electronics inequity. There are Americans who have radios, televisions, PCs or laptops, smartphones, video game consoles, just to name some of the electronic gear that smartwatches people have. There are people in Africa and Asia and Latin America that don't have any of those things. This inequity cannot stand. It's unfair. So what the United Nations, a new superpowered United Nations, is going to do is we are going to say, you can have at most 2 bits of electronics, that's all. Just 2. And everything beyond that 2 electronic devices is going to be confiscated to provide people in Zimbabwe with electronics, assuming, of course, they have a power grid. I'll get there. So, imagine how it would feel on the day when the troopers arrive at your home. They've already inspected your classroom, they inspect your vehicle, they inspect your house, they search under the house, they have little detectors to detect silicon signatures. Oh, you hit something up in the attic. You get to go to camp now, a concentration camp. You'll learn how to concentrate better. So what would you keep? If you only could have 2 electronic devices now and forevermore, what would you keep? Would it be your smartphone? Would it be your video console? What would it be? Yeah, why? Well, you volunteered.
So do a desktop computer and the monitor for it count separately?
That's a good question. Would the printer count separately? Let's say that the desktop setup is one item.
Oh.
Probably my desktop and my phone.
Okay. But no, your desktop setup would count as 2. But you get the printer, you get the monitor, you get the speakers, and you get the desktop tower and the
But
screen.
you don't have the portability.
Oh.
So then, like a laptop.
So it's okay. So you get a laptop. But a laptop's still not a phone. What would you pick?
Tamagotchi.
What's that?
It's a little robotic pet thing for you.
Does it steal on demand?
It's just like
Take all the green pieces of paper out of his wallet.
It's just like a little circle.
Okay. Tamagotchi. Oh, those Japanese. They're so clever. Yes.
My phone and my gaming laptop.
Okay. Gaming laptop. That's yours
I
too?
was gonna say my phone and my laptop. Because my laptop, I have games. I have a bunch of streaming services.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
I keep my radio
Smart
and
fridge.
my
Your radio and your gaming console. Now, is your radio one of these internet hooked up radios like Sirius
No, it's
XM?
just like a box CDs.
Good, that's what I have.
That's my answer.
Oh, what?
My phone and my smart fridge.
Smart fridge. Yeah, we haven't even gotten into the other electric devices that people have.
I'm gonna just
Smart. What the hell's a smart fridge?
it's a fridge, but it's intelligent.
I don't want a fridge intelligent. You're eating too many calories. You must stop now.
I can play Minecraft on it.
I'm pretty sure like there's like people like
Play Uno on
you
it.
can you can get like games like on the fridge.
Well, yeah, no. What you're going to end up with though is a fridge that makes you win a level in order to get a cheeseburger. And if you don't win the level, you get something like gruel.
Okay, and then what's stopping you from taking a hammer to the glass?
It has its own self-defense system. Yes,
So
because it's smart enough to develop it.
My brother, he's in Rio right now, and it's third world, but they tried so hard to make it seem like it's not third world.
Yeah, the smell gives it away. But go on.
Nobody has like electronic like, games and stuff. Like the most they'll have is like a Game Boy.
Yeah.
But they'll try really hard to make it seem like they have a lot more than that.
Well, they're proud. But it's not. They don't. That's the thing. Now, understand, if we, God forbid, end up getting involved in a fight over Ukraine or whatever, there are a lot of Americans who are going to wonder why they're going to risk their lives. But you come into somebody's home and try to steal their video games.
Oh, I'm gonna fight them.
Second Amendment time. No, people will fight because it's my property. Oh, I'll give you a quarter for every device we take. A quarter? Really? Oh, 25 cents. Oh, that's great. The Optimates say that a government that can steal your property against your will, property you legally acquired, is a government that is tyrannical. You can't let the government do that. And the Optimates have a point. They're not just being self-serving fat cat rich people. They have a point. So the Gracchi's plan is popular. The Optimates have an objection, but it looks like the Gracchi, one by one, they're separated by about 5 or 10 years, is going to get that plan approved. So one day the Tribune is in front of a crowd of Romans, I think in the Forum, talking about their plan to maximize Fundistas size and divide the land up and give everyone a loan. And suddenly a riot starts and the Gracchus is killed. He's beaten to death by the mob or by members in the mob. He's a tribune of the bleeping plebs. They're inviolate. You can't touch them. This is a crime against Rome's religion, against Rome's gods. It's an attack on the society as a whole. You don't attack a tribune of the plebs, even if you disagree with him. You can't touch them. Rome is now accursed because a tribune has been murdered in public. And the guys who did it are notable clients of the Optimates, of 2 or 3 Optimate senators. What do you think happened? Do you think those clients of those Optimate senators decided, yeah, what we got to do is, upon our own recognizance, we're going to go out and kill that guy. So Tiberius Gracchus, the elder of the Gracchi, he's dead. No one goes to jail. No one's punished. Oops, it happened. Oh, what an accident. It's a man-made disaster. But we can't tell who did it because the courts by this point are deeply corrupt. So a tribune of the plebs, agree with his program or not, is murdered on at a public event where he's engaged in politics, and nobody's punished. Thus ends Tiberius Gracchus. A few years later, his younger brother Gaius is on the same track. And again, it looks like the Gracchi's plan is going to gain speed, and they're going to have maximum. And it looks like they might actually win. And while he's speaking in front of a crowd, oops, it happens again. Prominent clients of Optimates senators, 2 or 3 of them, accidentally beat Gaius Gracchus to death in front of the entire crowd. This time, 1 or 2 people are sentenced to death. The people who did the beating. But in no way are the senators who obviously ordered the beating even a little bit punished. Oh, that's great. So not once, but twice has murder taken the place of politics. This is a tipping point. Up until now, Roman politics, as intense as it is, has been about speeches and votes. But when not 1, but 2 Gracchi are murdered by their political enemies in what is obviously political assassination, speeches and votes on both sides are not going to count. It is a bad, bad sign. From this point, the Republic is in actual peril. It is beginning to fall. Because if you don't have to argue with your enemies, if you don't have to debate your enemies, if you don't have to persuade the middle ground of your ideas over their ideas, if you can just kill your enemies and get away with it, why bother arguing? Why bother voting? Killing is so much easier. If you don't mind doing it, and they're Romans, they don't mind doing it. These guys go to gladiatorial games for fun. So, from the assassination of the Gracchi, because the assassins are never properly investigated or punished, the people who ordered the assassination, Roman politics stops being so much about speeches and votes and starts being about who can kill who first. That's a bad sign. But we're about to get to the tipping point, the fulcrum. This is actually the point that I think is a point of no return. I think you can still build your way back from the assassination of the Gracchi. What happens next is that, let's see. Okay. A low-born Roman plebeian from Puteoli, south of Rome, named Gaius Marius, rises up in the army, and he blackmails his way to get the most plum governorship in the Roman world. He becomes the Roman governor of Iberia, basically of Spain. Now, at the time Gaius Marius becomes governor, Spain is the Wild West of the Roman Empire. It's dusty and dry like the Wild West, and there are basically Roman cowboys like in the Wild West, ranchers and guys who struggle and survive by the skill that they have with their sword. And it's also a place where there's massive amounts of gold and silver being mined out of the ground. After this period, Rome will not have new supplies of gold and silver. It'll be about the same amount of wealth circulating around the Roman world. So this is a great time to be in Spain. And Marius goes to Spain a fairly poor man. He's an army officer. Army officers don't make lots of money. But in his few years as governor of Spain, Marius becomes the wealthiest man in the Roman world. No one has more money than him. He's Bezos, Gates, George Soros, all rolled up into one. Bezos, Gates, Soros. What?
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk, yeah. I actually like him. No, I think he's a free thinker. I don't always agree with him, but I like the fact that he thinks for himself. And he shot a car into space. That's got to count for something.
All right.
But I don't believe in electric cars. In any event, no, they exist. I believe that. So Marius comes back to Rome, a successful governor, the richest man in the Roman world, and an impressive army officer. And let's see. In North Africa, west of Carthage, is the country of Numidia. Numidia had been the ally of Rome against Carthage in the Second and Third Punic Wars. So Numidia is grown and expanded, and the king of Numidia is an ally of Rome. But King Jugurtha of Numidia decides that what he's going to do, it's not distracting, what he's going to do is he's going to throw Rome out of North Africa and become the new Carthage, because Jugurtha of Numidia. So Rome is going to crush him, and they give Gaius Marius and an assistant, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, command of a Roman army to crush Jugurtha of Numidia. It's called the Jugurthine War, or the Numidian War. And Marius does so. Richest man in Rome, army officer, former governor of Spain, crusher of the Numidians. But that's not all. There's an invasion, the last of these for a long, long time, of barbarians from north of the Alps. They're called the Cimbri and the Teutons. The Cimbri and the Teutons may have been Celts, they may have been Germans, we're not sure. They break across the Alps and they march through Spain like a hot knife through Italy, like a hot knife through butter. And the Romans are which is politicese for, oh my gosh, we're all going to die. Nobody can stop these. It's a massive barbarian horde. So Marius is called back to Rome because Marius has said, I know how to solve this. Solve it! So, what Marius does is he goes to the proletarians, his own clients and anyone else's, and says, look, join my army. I'll pay for your weapons. You'll get the best weapons in the Roman world. I'll pay your salary. In fact, I'll promise you retirement. If you serve with me for a dozen years or more, you're going to get land. You don't need to worry about the Gracchi. If you serve in the legions, you're going to get land at the end of it, enough to be a farmer. Maybe it's in Italy, maybe it's not in Italy. You're going to get land. Guess what? The toughest hombres among the proletarians join Marius's army. And he, because he commands the army and because he pays the army, trains the army up better than any Roman force before. And they have better equipment and more consistent formations. He actually reorganizes Rome's armies. Gets rid of manifolds, starts cohorts. He makes the best army in Rome. And it goes out and it spanks the Teutons and the Cimbris, the Cimbri and the Teutons. So Marius has won a war against Jugurtha, and he saved Rome from the barbarians. So they make him consul for life. Oh, this is not good. Consuls are supposed to be there for a year. He's consul for life. He'll have other consuls, but he's going to be obviously the most powerful man in Rome. He's the first man in Rome. Gaius Marius. His former aide, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, says, wait, Marius is sort of a populare. I'm from the Cornelii, one of the best families in Rome. I'm an Optimate. Hey, Marius, can I go east and fight the Greeks? King Mithridates? And Marius says, sure, go fight the Greeks. And Sulla goes to the proles himself and says, join my army, I'll provide your weapons, I'll provide your training, I'll give you a retirement, you're going to get land just like Marius's did. So Sulla gets an army, and he goes east, and he kicks Greek bottom. Then, after kicking Greek bottom for a few years, Sulla comes back to Rome with his army. Marius organizes his army, and they fight, and fight, and fight, and fight, and fight. Marius and Sulla. Marius ends up with having a stroke, and he loses, semi-paralyzed. And Sulla is now master of Rome, and he's made dictator for life. Dictator, but for life. Oh, this is really not good. Because their armies are the blueprint for Rome's new armies. No longer will citizens have to buy their own gear. No longer will citizens do military service as public duty, as public service. No, they're going to get paid by rich guys who provide everything, including their retirement. So no longer are the armies independent Roman citizens doing what they think is right. Every soldier in Marius' army is a client of Marius. Every soldier in Sulla's army is a client of Sulla. They may march under the banner of Senatus Populusque Roma, but they work for the guy who pays them. They work for the guy who pays them. It's not Rome's army, it's Marius's. It's not Rome's army, it's Sulla's. This is the tipping point, because from this point, politics is not about votes and speeches. It's not even about the occasional political assassination. Because the different politicians now have their own armies. And this ushers in a period of civil war. And that's where we'll leave it for today. Imagine, by the way, Elon Musk having his own army. Jeff Bezos having an air wing of bombers.
Probably does.
Bill Gates having a squadron of nuclear submarines.
Maybe he does.
Yeah. Donald Trump having an armored division. Hoorah. It would not be good for democracy, would it? So, anyway, that's where we are. Thank you. Remember, I didn't say this last time. Your work for Monday is Chapter Survey 6 and 7A. Now, this is how I want you to do it. You do the written work for Chapter Survey 6, but you also read the pages into Chapter 7. You'll need to know that information in order to function in the class. You don't actually have to do the written part of Chapter Survey 7 until the next one of these is due, which is March 7th. But what's due Monday is Chapter Survey 6, but you have to read 7A. Now, in the past, I had people do 2 chapter surveys this time. Chapter Survey 6 and the beginning part of Chapter Survey 7 as separate pieces of paper. I am experimenting with being more nice and reasonable.
Aww.
If none of you
Care about us.
No, I don't. If I cared, I'd make you work harder. What it is I'm going to see. But if most of you don't read 7A, we're going back to the harder stuff. Thank you. Come again.
Don't mess it up.